So I read Against the State, an Anarcho-Capitalist Manifesto by Lew Rockwell. Now, I'm quite a fan of Lew Rockwell. I've never actually read one of his books. This was the first book I've read. I've actually had it for years, but only just now got around to finally reading it. And I will say, I'm less of an ANCAP now than I was before. I have a soft spot for it, but for the most part, I would not consider myself an ANCAP. And I think that gives me a specific, more of a unique viewpoint to critique this book and review this both because I both sympathize with the ideas but don't really identify with them myself. And I would say overall, the book makes quite a few arguments in the sense of I personally wouldn't have found it convincing, and it did not convince me now. But it does contain lots of good information. It is pretty much a book that just says, here's all of this information about why the state is bad. And there are quite a bit good bits of information in there, like quite a good things. Okay, good arguments like, oh, turns out this happened. Turns out this happened. Although it's such an overview in the sense that, of course, it obviously doesn't. I don't think it would convince many people, or as many people as say Rothbard's books would. But I did overall enjoy it. I thought it was good, and it does have lots of good points, good specific points about how bad the state is. And of course, it does clarify a few things that most people just assume are true, and it goes through and says, hey, these things are actually false. My biggest critique of the book overall is the lack of sources, honestly, the lack of sources. I don't see there's no index, there's no, at least the version I had, there's no bibliography, there's no notes, there's no citations to anything, and that's why some of the things I did Google, some of the things I were interested enough that I did try to find the original sources, and they seem legit for the things I personally looked up. There was one that I really didn't find that believable, that Hitler was really promoting like whole wheat grain or whole wheat bread. And I looked it up, and it's like, hey, turns out a reliable source said this was true. And it also kind of said that Hitler really loved soybeans, that apparently the soybean was the Nazi bean, apparently. So I just kind of find that hilarious. But anyways, back to the book. That is my biggest issue with it. I've said that before on multiple reviews, that you can learn a lot about a book, or you can judge a book kind of, not perfectly, but it says a lot about a book based on the number of sources. And it doesn't mean that the sources are themselves of high quality. It doesn't mean that the book is then definitely correct or good, but it's a generally good sign. And the lack of sources for this book means that if I were to cite anything, I would have to take the time to really Google search it and find where he got the source from. Whereas, at the very least, if he had cited enough of the sources that he mentioned, I could at least say, okay, well, at least there is a citation. And then I could just quick look in the back of the book and say, okay, well, it's from a reliable source, so I feel comfortable quoting it. Whereas here, that really, I think, is the worst part of the book. And I hate to hamper specifically on that, but that is a big negative to the book. That it's not nothing I can really quote too much. It's something that I would have to take a lot of time to go through and fact check each of these individually. Even though I trust Lew Rockwell, even though I know he's a really smart dude, I love listening to what he says. As someone, just as an author of a book, he needs to, like, citations would be good, and they weren't there, so that's my biggest negative. But overall, I did enjoy reading it. It's just that's a big negative. But let me know what you think in the comment section. Like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more, and thanks for watching.